The judge in New York gags Trump right as trial is around the corner. And this is not a surprise. Juan, the judge in Alvin Bragg's prosecution for the so-called hush money. In this case, it's the Bragg prosecution on fake made-up documents that we're trying to figure out how they're criminal. Still to be seen because Alvin hasn't actually told us what his theory of the case is. He says, I'll wait for trial to do that. So we are gearing up for trial. The trial has already been continued once. It was supposed to take place on March 25th. That has not happened, so it got rescheduled for April 15th. We're going to be covering that here, of course, in depth. But as we inch closer and closer to this trial date, as they are racing to get Trump convicted before the election, we now have a gag order. So Trump can't speak about certain things, which is a big problem because one of the people who was a star witness in this case is Michael Cohen, who is a convicted perjurer, convicted for lying to Congress, convicted for tax charges, campaign charges, all sorts of misreporting. Guy's just a mess. And a federal judge has said he's convicted perjurer. He's likely committed perjury again very recently in another trial in New York. That was the Letitia James trial where she had her shoes off walking around with her stinky feet. And he was the lying witness there, and Alvin Bragg's bringing him back to this case. Okay, so can Trump talk about any of that? Can he comment on any of this sham, partisan, ridiculous case that was rejected by the DOJ, was basically rejected by Alvin Bragg some time ago until it got resurrected as the zombie case because the other three prosecutions are all failing. So this is the only thing they have left, right? Break glass in case of emergency. So here was Trump this morning, and some might be asking if this prompted the gag order or not, because Trump was dropping this one bright and early at 6:42 in the morning. Trump says, "Good morning, America. I have something to say." Posted on Truth to 13,000 likes, says, Judge Juan Merchan, a very distinguished looking man, is nevertheless a true and certified Trump hater who suffers from a very serious case of Trump derangement syndrome. In other words, he hates me. His daughter is a senior executive at a super liberal Democrat firm that works for Adam Shifty Schiff, the guy who got censured for lying to America when he was on the Intelligence Committee. Loser. So pathetic. Also, the Democratic National Committee. So Trump says the judge's daughter is a senior executive at a super liberal Democrat firm that works for the censured Adam Schiff and the DNC and the Democrat Senate Majority PAC and even crooked Joe Biden. He was recently the judge on an unrelated trial of a long-term employee, elderly and not in good health. This judge treated him viciously, telling him either you cooperate or I'm putting you in jail for 15 years. Now he pled, that other person, went to jail for a very minor offense, highly unusual, served 4 months in Rikers, and now they are after him again. This time for allegedly, doesn't look like a lie to me, and they threaten him again with 15 years if he doesn't say something bad about Trump. He is devastated and scared. These country-destroying scoundrels, says Trump, and thugs have no case against me. Witch hunt. So who are they talking about here? Unrelated trial of a long-term employee, elderly and not in good health. Not sure who that might be, whether we have heard the name of that person, but they're trying to find people in Trump's outer circle or inner circle or any connection to Trump at all that they can use to beat him over the head. These country-destroying scoundrels. Okay, that's 6:42 in the morning. Trump drops this one next. He says, all right, DA Bragg, again, we're in New York, working in close coordination with crooked Joe Biden in his campaign, has no case against me. He admitted as much when he first took office. In fact, he was furious that they were even pursuing such a ridiculous case where there's no crime. All others in law enforcement had taken a pass on this. DOJ, right? Everyone else investigated, no crime. The DOJ has a bunch of records on this case. They just dropped it all on Alvin Bragg's desk. What? Where'd that come from? You know, from 2016, it's a Stormy Daniels payoff, so-called. Ridiculous case. There is no crime. All others in law enforcement had taken a pass, where reliance on a convicted liar and felon, Michael Cohen, is necessary. He's the key witness. He is the hub of the whole thing, like he was in Tish's case. And where a dirtbag lawyer named Mark Pomerantz did things that were really bad. And we've talked all about that long time ago, right? When this case was first making its way through. But if only they could get Judge Juan Merchan, and they did, just like they did for other cases. Weird, right? Strange how these anomalous case assignments get made. New criminal case gets filed and perfect. It goes to the worst Trump-hating judge that America knows, Judge Chutkan. Boom! Here's another one, right? In jurisdictions they control, or they've got, a lot of leverage, goes in New York. Guess where it goes? Judge Juan Merchan, not a fan of Trump. Here you go, have the case. They didn't luck out so well in Florida, did they? Now, all others, and same thing, right? Pick all the other cases. Judge Kaplan in New York, where Roberta Kaplan brought her case with Judge Kaplan. We also have the Angeron Areola, aka the Nip, who's also the worst possible human because he doesn't know anything about the law and he hates Trump. So it's a terrible person for Trump to have as a judge. Then they forum shop. They pick different locations where they can bring these claims. Like in Colorado, Colorado, where there's like 7 Democrats who are all appointed to the Supreme Court. I wonder how they're going to vote. And they voted an insane opinion to remove Trump and then got overturned 9-0. Okay, that's what these people are. That's where they are. They're all just being, moved around like chess pieces on a map, on a board. So he talks about Mark Pomerantz, but only if they could get Judge. Now, Judge Juan Merchan, they got him. Now, they did, just like they did for other cases. Now, so much for a random choice, says Trump. Judge Merchan should recuse himself. He cannot give me a fair trial. And likewise, for the sake of fairness, this, quote, political opponent trial should take place in Staten Island with a new and unbiased judge. The trial should not be allowed to start in the middle of my campaign for president. They could have filed more than 3 years ago. They waited. This is another witch hunt for the purposes of election interference, obviously. That's why there are 4 simultaneous criminal cases all happening, one right after another. They're literally trying to jockey the trial dates in with one another. There's not enough time in the year. Which one can go first and second and third? Right? They stack them all up here for a reason. The Oath Keepers have already been done and sentenced. Much more complicated case there. The Proud Boys, same thing there. They know how to prosecute cases when they want to move them quickly. They wait all the way until the indictment. They file the indictment and then they have to race when Trump doesn't have time to respond. They're disgusting. It's unfair because they're cheaters. Here's Trump's final post before we get into the gag. So Judge wakes up. He's seeing this one. He goes, Trump says, DA Bragg fought everyone about trying this no crime case, but crooked Joe Biden's thugs pushed him around to go forward anyways. And they pushed him hard, just like we heard they did with Big Fanny. They wanted him to go after me, Joe's crooked's political opponent. He just didn't want to do it though. So they ended up sending Matthew Colangelo, who's this guy, Merrick Garland's right hand, says Trump, after a stop at the corrupt and racist New York State Tishy Letitia Peekaboo James's office, who takes her shoes off in the courtroom, stinking up the entire building, to directly oversee the DA, perhaps to make sure that Bragg followed their illegal orders and their commands. Now, he eventually agreed to do that case that he never wanted to do. Pomerantz and Cohen were death, right? It's an insane case to bring a literal convicted perjurer who a federal judge said just lied again in the last trial, or else lied to a federal court when he took his plea deal. Now their hope is that Judge Juan Merchan, who should be recused, will pull them through. Trump says, stop the steal. It's like happening right now, right? So we're going to wake up and, if something goes wrong with the election, which we're hoping that it's too big to rig, every single one of us is going to call every person we've ever known, met, and loved in our entire lives and drag them to the polls. Are you voting for Trump? Get your butt down there. And, make it happen this year, right? We're not playing around this time. So that's going to be part of it. But if something goes off, right, something goes wrong, Trump lost fair and square. You people are just being ridiculous insurrectionists again. What? You guys launched the entire arsenal of the U.S. government against Trump in 2024. Are you nuts? It's being rigged right now. Trump doesn't, again, think about even just the money. How much money does Trump have to come out of pocket that could be used to campaigning, traveling, hiring staff, pushed back into marketing, whatever, that has to go to his legal defense? And the legal defense is defending against a case that is being prosecuted by the government, which has a limitless amount of money and a bunch of psychopaths with unlimited power. So it's 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 10-to-1, right? Ask some attorneys. The number could be 10-to-1, could be 100-to-1, right? Depending on how much money you want to spend. But there's no upper limit. So it's all election interference that's happening right now. And they could have avoided that. They could have charged him in 2023. They could have charged him in 2021. They charged a bunch of people. This is not that complicated of a case. It's like 5 charges in many of these incidents. This one was a Stormy Daniels case from 2016. So they could have charged this one a long time ago. But all right, I digress. Now, enough out of me. Let's get to the order from the judge. Judge Juan Merchan submitted this gag order, and here's what it says. In the Supreme Court of the state of New York, which is the lower level court, they have things backwards there in their courts like many other decisions they make. This is the decision in order from Judge Juan Merchan, who is presiding over the Alvin Bragg prosecution, which is scheduled for trial on April 15th. Now, Trump has been communicating his position on the legitimacy of this prosecution, and the judge is not happy about it, so has issued a gag order. Here's what the judge says. Juan writes the following. All right, Trump has been charged with 34 counts of falsifying a business record, okay? False business records. And remember this case, it's ridiculous. It's like an invoice, a check, and a receipt. It's like that, right? Okay, charge 1, charge 2, charge 3, times, 12 months in a year. They skipped a month, whatever. So boom, that's 34 counts, whatever it is, right? It's like literally like that. So Cohen sends an invoice, somebody writes a check, it makes an accounting record on the docket, falsifying. Trump did all the things. So 34 counts. Again, we're trying to know why that's a felony and why this amounts to a felony. And we're waiting to see how the statute of limitations is already not told when this case gets underway. So we'll keep our eyes out for that. But here's the judge. Now, the charges arise from allegations that Trump attempted to conceal an illegal scheme to influence the 2016 presidential election. Now, specifically, Bragg and the government, they claim that Trump directed an attorney who worked for his his company to pay $130K to Stormy to prevent her from publicizing an encounter with Trump. Now, it's further alleged that Trump thereafter reimbursed the attorney, that's Cohen, for payments through a series of checks and caused business records associated with the repayments to be falsified in order to conceal his criminal conduct. Now, trial on this matter is scheduled to commence on April 15th. And so the question is, well, wait a minute, what are those payments? Were those payments that are like, campaign payments that the DOJ might be interested in, that the Federal Election Committee, the FEC might be interested in, or they might bring criminal charges against Trump? No, they looked into it, no charges. This is old, 2016. They're still doing this, guys. So they looked into it, no charges. They had a bunch of different prosecutors in Manhattan kick this around for a long time, Sirens Vance and the rest of them, and nobody brought it. Then they wrote a book about it, whining about this. Alvin Bragg got a lot of pushback, and so now he's bringing it. But the point is, right, like these types of transactions are done all the time, right? People enter into non-disclosure agreements. You might have some moral qualms with that, but that's the practice in New York. And they're saying that Trump basically just miscategorized these things. So let's see. Now, on February 22nd, Alvin filed the instant motion. Now, Alvin, was asking for an order that restricts Donald Trump's extrajudicial statements for the duration of the trial. Put a gag on him. Now, the restrictions sought are in part consistent with the U.S. Court of Appeals for the other case in the Trump world where he's also gagged. So remember, Trump was gagged in the Chutkan case, and I believe that's the case they're referencing that was up on appeal about how far the gag can go. Now, on March 4th, Trump filed a response in opposition. So Bragg says gag. Alvin Bragg, the gag. So he's here arguing that his speech may be only restricted, Trump responds, by the application of a more strenuous standard than was applied by the DC Circuit, and that Bragg, who wants the gag, has failed to meet the standard in that case. So anyways, here's the judge, right? So that's the background. Other courts have already gagged Trump, and remember, there's that domino effect that's going on where one judge does it and then the other judge say, well, they did it. They had to do it in their case. And it's kind of performative, right? So as long as one person can make an argument for it first, then they just parlay on the back of prior argument. And they say, well, there was apparently a witness who got scared in that first case. And so that witness being scared means that we have to gag Trump so that another witness doesn't potentially become scared in our case. And we're like, what witness? Engeron's a whack job. Now, here's the discussion. Judge Juan writes, the freedom of speech that's guaranteed by the First Amendment and the state's interest of fair administration are implicated by the relief sought. So he's a balancing test. Here he writes it. The balancing of these interests must come with the highest of scrutiny. So your First Amendment rights versus the government's and the court's rights to maintain a, decorum in the courtroom without Trump, blasting off on truth. Saying, here's a quote from U.S. Supreme Court case 1978 tells us, properly applied, the test of balancing all this requires a court to make its own inquiry into the imminence and the magnitude of the danger said to flow from the particular utterance. So what is the speech saying? What's the danger? What's the imminence? And then balance the character of the evil as well as the likelihood against the need for free and unfettered expression. All right, so we're balancing a bunch of stuff, right? Just put it on a scale. How much free speech do you really need here? What's the character of the harm from that free speech? We're going to weigh it against the right, that you have to speak freely. But the court has an obligation to prevent outside influences, including extrajudicial speech, from disturbing the integrity of a trial. Interesting. So he's going to gag Trump, and we're going to see if he's going to gag everyone else. Is Michael Cohen going to still be invited back on with Jen Psaki to do their little patty cake game? With the standards set forth in Landmark, this court has reviewed the record of prior extrajudicial statements attributed to Trump. Okay? So they're going back to the other courts. Oh yeah, Chutkan said Trump was a menace when he was there. And Engeron said Trump was a menace when he was there. And Judge Kaplan, I think, on the E. Jean Carroll case, did they gag him there? So we're adding all of those prior statements that we can attribute to Trump. Now, notably, the Judge Juan, he writes, Trump does not deny the utterance of any of those extrajudicial statements or the reported effect those statements had on the targeted parties. Rather, they say, Trump says in response, that as the presumptive nominee, quote, and the leading candidate in 2024, that he must have, Trump saying, unfettered access to the voting public, and he must be able to respond to attacks from his political opponents, and he must be able to criticize these public figures who are waging this partisan prosecution against him. The judge writes, yet these extrajudicial statements, though, from Trump, they went far beyond defending himself from the attacks by public figures. His statements, says this judge, were threatening, they were inflammatory, and they were denigrating, and the targets of his statements, they ranged from local and federal officials, courts and court staff, prosecutors and staff assigned to those cases, and to private individuals, including grand jurors, who were just performing their civic duty. Trump's blasting all these people, and the judge is not, he's saying you don't have the right to have that free speech, and I don't know who he's talking about specifically, but he continues. Now, the consequence consequence of those statements, here's what we've done. Include not only creating fear on the part of the individuals targeted, but also the assignment of increased security resources, I guess for maybe big fanning, to investigate threats and to protect the individuals and the family members thereof. Saying such inflammatory extrajudicial statements undoubtedly risk impeding the orderly administration of this court. Saying Trump is too dangerous to speak freely. Look at all this damage he's caused from one truth. Trump does pack a lot into one single truth. It's pretty amazing. The concentration of jabs per truth is very high. If you put it under a microscope, there'd be a lot of, Tish and Fanny consequences in there. So the judge continues now. Trump contends that the continued compliance with the existing court orders, referencing both the admonition at the start of the proceeding and the recent protective order, the judge says, that we talked about with juror anonymity, is an effective and least restrictive alternative because Trump is such a monster, we can gag him. Trump is making the argument that you don't need the protective order. Everything that you've already issued currently is fine. We don't need it to go any further. Trump is supporting that by noting that he has generally refrained from making extrajudicial statements about individuals associated with this case, which is different as in other cases. And that's in contrast to other statements targeting other people in other court proceedings, right? So Trump is saying, no, I haven't done it in this case though. I've only done it in the other cases. And so since I haven't done it here, you can't gag me for anything I've done here. You've already given us the admonition at the start of this trial, at the start of these proceedings. And so that's sufficient. You don't need to add in additional limitations on my speech. So Juan comes out, he says, this court is unpersuaded. Now, although this court did not issue an order restricting Trump's speech at the inception of this case, choosing instead to give an admonition, given the nature and the impact of the statements made against this court and a family member thereof. Oh, the judge read the truth this morning. And a family member talking about the judge's Democrat daughter, who apparently works for censured Adam Schiff in the DNC. The DA, Alvin Bragg, and the assistant DA, the witnesses in this case, liar Michael Cohen, as well as the nature and the impact of the extrajudicial statements made by Trump in the DC Circuit case, which resulted in the DC Circuit, also corrupt, issued an order restricting his speech. This is the judge. Given that the eve of trial is upon us, it is without question that the imminency of the risk of harm is now paramount. Now we're all going to die. The Supreme Court, in another case called Nebraska, they held that the court has the obligation to prevent actual harm to the integrity of the proceedings. So does that mean Michael Cohen's going to be gagged too? Is Tish going to be gagged so that she doesn't have an opportunity to talk about Trump in any way? Obviously stop tweeting because she lost the bond battle. But here, judge continues, says, when the fairness of the trial is threatened by Trump's True Social posts, reversals are but palliatives. The cure lies in those remedial remedies that will prevent the prejudice at the beginning. So in other words, don't let this get reversed on appeal. Fix it before it goes bad, right? Don't let someone run their mouths and some witness get in trouble or whatever. So you gotta, have a trial again or something and, eliminate the mistrial, whatever the misconduct was, correct that and do it again. He said, just fix it now. Now on the record submitted and in keeping with its mandate, Juan Mercan says, this judge does not need to wait for the realization of further proscribed speech targeted at the participants in this trial. Footnote 1 says, Trump argues that the references to speech targeted at individual prosecutors in this instant case did not substantiate their claims, saying that the people only cite posts which occurred in March and June. Notably, within hours of the court appearance on March 25th, setting the trial date for April 15th, Trump targeted an individual prosecutor assigned to this case. Okay, so what? Referring to him as a radical left from the DOJ, put into the DA's office to run the trial against Trump that was done by Biden and his thugs. Yeah, all true. So Trump, I guess, can't say that because he's talking about Matthew Colangelo, who got thrown over from Biden from the DOJ to go handle this, right? Go bring the charges. So that's from a video. So Trump, I guess he can't talk about that, right? That's illegal now. Let's see what he says. Now, Alvin Bragg proposes additional restrictions on his speech so that we can't see all this corruption and the politicization of this with our own eyes. We can't see it. With respect to prospective and sworn jurors, now, the restrictions sought are an extension of the other protective order, and while the DC Circuit addressed only the risk of influencing witnesses and intimidating or harassing other trial participants, in accordance with the lower court ruling, it nevertheless opined, again, so they're going from the DC Circuit. They said one of the most powerful interests supporting broad prohibitions on trial participants' speech is to avoid contamination of the jury pool. That's weird, because Cohen is on with Jen Psaki like once a week. To protect the impartiality of the jury once selected and to confine the evidentiary record before the jury to the courtroom, and to stop the intrusion into the jury's deliberations from the Trump case. Now, while the protective order here, says Juan, related to juror anonymity prevents the dissemination of personal information, is not sufficient to prevent extrajudicial speech outside the courtroom, stuff that Trump might say, that targets jurors and to expose them to whatever this means, an atmosphere of intimidation. So the proposed restrictions by Bragg are narrowly tailored to obtain that result. So Juan finishes, he says, the uncontested record reflects that Trump and his prior extrajudicial statements establish that there is a sufficient risk to the administration of justice, consistent with the law, and there's nothing else we can do to address this risk other than gagging him. And so therefore, it is hereby ordered that Alvin Bragg's motion to restrict Trump and his extrajudicial statements is hereby granted, and Trump is gagged from the following. Trump cannot make or direct others to make public statements, so he's not directing us to do anything. We're just going to call all these people partisan hacks indefinitely. We're going to call them hacks even harder now. All right, Colangelo, that's right, buddy boy. We're going to call you a partisan hack with even more energy now because Trump can't say it. We're going to double down on it here. You too, Alvin, and you too, Judge Daughter, loser, DNC hack. So they are not allowed to direct or make other public statements about him, but we'll do it. To or reasonably foreseeable witnesses concerning their potential participation in the investigation or in this criminal proceeding. So no public statements about witnesses. So Michael Cohen, for example. So that lying perjurer who's got multiple criminal convictions for being a piece of garbage. Trump can't say that, but we can. Making or directing others. So again, we're under no direction here from Trump, at all. But I mean, if his people want to reach out and say, what's up, free to do that. I know that VP slot's open. Okay. Making or directing others to make public statements about the counsel in this case, other than Alvin, the DA. So you can talk about Alvin, but not, I guess, Colangelo, right? So one DA you get to talk about, but not anyone else. You can't talk about the member of the court staff or the DA's staff or family members like this judge's DNC daughter or any staff member if those statements are made with the intent to materially interfere with counsel's work in this case or with knowledge that the interference is likely to result in that. What does that even mean? What if you just want to talk about it because you want to call attention to the partisan family that is behind the prosecution of their political enemies? How's that? Judge might say that's going to materially interfere with the case. And also, you can't make or direct others to make public statements about any prospective juror or any juror in this criminal proceeding. And that you normally say is fair, right? That's fair game, unless you get a juror like we had in the Chauvin trial, who was literally attending the George Floyd protests, even though he was sitting on the jury judging Derek Chauvin. So, all right, so the foregoing now constitutes the decision and order of the court. It is, as it always is, cowardly of these judges and these prosecutors to make these requests. Now, of course, you don't want anybody to be threatened or harmed, and all of that is already illegal, right? It's already illegal to threaten people and to harass people, and people get prosecuted for that all the time. And so there are mechanisms for that, right? You don't also need to gag Trump. That is just one part of what is happening. There is more happening, of course. Judge is also going to be sealing some records. We'll talk about that in the next segment. But don't forget to subscribe, my friends, because this trial is happening very soon, and it feels like this one is going to go. Like they are digging their heels in to make sure they can get at least this one trial done before the election starts. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel wherever it is you're watching this. Thanks for liking this video. Thanks for inviting a friend or family member to come on over here and join us as we cover what's really happening in all of these litigations, all of these Trump trials. And so we'll look forward to seeing you back here. Don't forget to check out some of the links in the description below. RobertGouveia.com is where you can go if you want to read any of the PDFs that we cover here. We'll see you over there and back here on the next one.